Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The United States has cut all intelligence sharing to Ukraine, though officials imply that it could resume once peace talks over conflict with Russia resume. Meanwhile, France is to host an EU defence meeting with a European peace proposal expected soon. US President Donald Trump issues a last warning to Hamas, ordering the release of Israeli hostages. Meanwhile, Hamas has confirmed that direct talks have been held with US officials over the hostage releases, with Israel also being consulted. Chinese President Xi Jinping says that China is ready for any type of war with the US in response to the latest American tariffs. Trump says tariffs on Canadian and Mexican automakers will be paused, while Macron slams expected EU duties. At least 15 people have been injured after a South Korean fighter jet accidentally drops 8 bombs on a civilian area. The South Korean Air Force says an investigation is underway as 2 people remain in a serious condition. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned Hamas to take Trump's threats seriously, saying the president has lost his patience. Trump's warning follows secret US-Hamas negotiations in Doha over the release of hostages. On Truth Social, Trump demanded the release of all hostages and return of victims' bodies, warning Gaza's future depends on it. The UN Security Council, meanwhile, held a closed session over fears of a looming food shortage in Gaza. On the other hand, the Palestinian Foreign Ministry has urged its ambassadors to step up over diplomatic efforts following the emergency Arab summit in Cairo. Regional leaders endorsed a counter-proposal to President Trump's plan to expel Gaza's residents and redevelop the territory. We are joined by 2 guests to discuss this story. Mustafa Ahmed Munaf, journalist located in Baghdad. We're also joined by Mark Sofa, former diplomat located in Tel Aviv. Mustafa, I wanted to get your outlook on these comments made by President Trump on his social media, Truth Social. He threatens the people of Gaza with death if the hostages aren't returned. Can I get your outlook on these comments from President Trump?
Well, President Trump says to his talking about the last warning to Hamas, which is including a strong about potential military action or consequences, is likely intended to project a hard-line stress. However, such as threats can be humanitarian crisis in Gaza, increasing the risks of civilian population, especially by the things they are suffering in Gaza. In my opinion, it will be a very hard impact on Gaza civilians and could be profound, with the highest risk of diplomatic and injury and deaths and further compounding suffering in the region.
Mark Sofa, how does Israel perceive President Donald Trump's ultimatum to Hamas, demanding the immediate release of all these hostages and return of victims' bodies, and especially the language that he used, with the warning that Gaza's future depends on it?
Well, I don't speak on behalf of the Israeli government. I've said this on this program many times before, that I'm actually very critical of the current Israeli government. But if you look at the comments made by Trump, if you take away the embellishments and you look at the comments, what we're seeing here is a increased pressure on the Hamas murderers. Even those of us who are liberal and who want peace with the Palestinians will have no truck whatsoever with the Hamas. They're just a bunch of murdering terrorist extremists. And I think what we need to do, there's still 59 hostages languishing inside of Gaza. To my best of my knowledge, 35 of them have been killed by the Hamas, and 22 of them are still alive and languishing there. Among them, 5 American hostages. So I understand the American anger. at Hamas. And here we see an attempt, and I think it's a brave attempt, without getting into the languages of how pressure can be put on this terrorist organization to release the last 59 hostages, dead and alive.
Mustafa, Hamas officials have confirmed direct talks with the United States to secure the release of these hostages. What are your thoughts on the potential outcomes of these discussions, and how might they shape future US and Middle East relations?
Direct talks between the Hamas and the United States regarding the release of the hostages could have significantly important impact in the Middle East region. If successfully, it might show a pragmatic side to the U.S. policy in dealing with the groups it classifies as terrorists. They always says they don't go with peace with the terrorists and don't have even discuss any peace with them. If they did that, that means Hamas will be legitimizing as encouraging future hostage taking. It will be affecting the regime, and it will give Hamas more power to take more hostages and affect the regime in the Middle East.
Mark Sofa, obviously you are not associated with the Israeli government, but looking out and speaking to people in Tel Aviv, what do you think Israel's stance is on these direct negotiations that Hamas have had with the US in Doha, and how might these talks impact the current state of this fragile ceasefire?
Well, first of all, I take issue with the other interlocutor here. I don't know what classified as terrorists mean when 5,000 people march into a neighboring country and murder, rape and pillage, kill indiscriminately and take hundreds of hostages. If they are classified as terrorists, only classified and not actual terrorists, then I don't actually know what a terrorist is. So that's point number one. Point number two, I think, is important to remember that Trump, and I think most civilized countries in the world, not just the United States and the West, view Hamas as a proscribed terrorist organization which needs to be eradicated from any possibility of a military capability or leadership or political capability. So the question arises, what is the best way to deal with the current situation of the 59 hostages still being held there? And if it includes direct negotiations with Hamas in order to release them, so that's the decision that's been made. And that's, I personally can live with it. I don't know if everybody can. It doesn't mean that it's a legitimization of Hamas in my mind. It means it's one focused view on how to get the hostages out, and the hatred of the Hamas, the disdain for a terrorist organization will continue. It's not a legitimization of Hamas, to my mind, by any means. It's a move to try and save as many of the people endangered inside of Gaza, held by Hamas. And once this is over, the disdain and the hatred for this terrorist organization will remain as it is today.
Mustafa, can I have your direct response to that, please? And then after that, I want to talk about the humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza currently, with the UN Security Council expressing confirmed concerns over a looming food shortage in Gaza. What are the measures the Middle Eastern countries are considering to alleviate this crisis?
Well, as the Middle Eastern countries that in the region, they are trying their best to help the Gaza people and Palestine as much as they can. But the blockade continues to continue with the crisis in the Palestine area. The Middle Easters, as countries like Egypt, Iraq, maybe Jordan, and much more countries are trying their best by flying aids and money and everything they can and have in the resources to help the people in Gaza. And on the point of what Mr. Mark said right now, it's all about the humanity. If we don't be humans, what else do we have in this world? We don't know if they are terrorists or not. We are humans after all. We don't care after all that if they are terrorists or not. The important thing is it's the principle that the Palestinians have. It's all about the principle. I just said that maybe if it will be affected by the legitimacy of them, because they always say, the USA says that they are terrorists. We don't deal with their terrorists. We don't what do we say it? We don't communicate with them. We don't talk with them. We don't have even find any solution with them. Then that's the thing. It's I say it's hypocrite by the US actually, and I believe the only way to can help those people is to support each other. That's what the countries right now are.
Mark Sofer, I want to come to you on that point. The US is. I want to get you to respond to Mustafa's point of the US is in fact negotiating with these terrorists, and him calling them hypocrites for doing so.
Well, again, I'm not going to start throwing out languages. I make a huge distinction between the uninvolved citizens of Gaza, the Palestinians there who haven't been involved in mass murder and terrorism, and those who have been. And I think that would be normal in the civilized community. So to say that we are all humans, I don't know how human it is to march in and rape and kill and murder as many people as possible just because they're Jewish. In fact, not because they're Jewish. Some of them, many of them were foreign, many of them were Arab and Israeli Arabs and Druze, etc. So I think we have to make the distinction. A war has been thrust on Israel. I think, and actions like the 7th of October have consequences. There's no getting away from it, and nobody's going to sit idly by. However, as far as the humanitarian crisis is concerned, I do share the worry that there will be one, but I must say that over the past year and a half, all we've been hearing from the United Nations is a looming virus, looming starvation, and it's never actually come about. And I don't think it'll come about this time as well. What we are looking at here, what we are seeing here, I hope it won't come about, and I don't believe it'll come about. What we are seeing here is a serious attempt to put pressure on this half-crazed, proscribed terrorist extremist grouping called Hamas to release the hostages and to disappear from the face of the earth. I'm not talking about the Palestinians in Gaza by any means, those uninvolved ones, but I am talking about Hamas. And as far as every one of Hamas members are concerned, including those who took part in 7th of October and those who are still there, as far as I'm concerned, they can all be killed. And I'm really quite liberal. I believe in peace with the Palestinians. I believe in a two-state solution. I believe that we have to find a better future for Israelis and Palestinians side by side. But this does not include Hamas. Under any circumstances, and as I said in many occasions, Israel is divided on many issues. That's the nature of democracy, and that's the nature that we work in, and that's how it goes. But on one thing we have a consensus, and that is that Hamas is taboo in every single way. Hamas is out as far as we're concerned. Their elimination, as far as their political and their military capabilities are concerned, is a must. If the Palestinians want to move forward towards peace with Israel, and if the Arab world wants to move forward. And I think this sentiment is not just limited to Israel, it's limited to the entire civilized Arab world as well. In the Gulf, in North Africa, those who are against extremism are against Hamas, period. Not against Palestinian people, and neither are we. Neither am I, for certain, and the vast majority of the Israeli population is not against uninvolved Palestinians who are innocent and haven't taken part in the mass terror that we've been seeing coming from Hamas and others.
I wanted to move on to the Arab League's counter-proposal now. Mustafa, following this emergency Arab summit in Cairo, how does the Arab League's counter-proposal to President Trump's plan, which includes redeveloping Gaza into this Riviera of the Middle East without displacing its residents, aim to address the current crisis in Gaza?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
I said following the emergency summit in Cairo by the Arab nations, how does the Arab League counter-proposal to Donald Trump's plan, which includes redeveloping Gaza without displacing its residents, aim to address the current crisis in Gaza?
You see, there's something in the Middle East right now. There's division in the opinions. Some of them are saying that if we relocate the Palestinians to Sina Sahara, that will be a good idea, or good opinion from the President Trump. And some countries, they are saying that no, you can't do that because it's their origin country. You can't kick them out. I think the President Trump will try his best to convince the most Arab leaders, or we can say the Arab leaders countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and some other countries. They are the most important countries. If they say yes, or if they said we are with your opinion on relocating the Palestinians out of Palestine, he will have their blessings for doing such a thing. But I think Donald Trump will never do that because he knows the consequences of that. And I think he will find another solution with the Arab leaders in the summit in Cairo, and we will see what will happen there because we don't know the future, not yet.
Mark Sofa, what is the with Donald Trump in power and with Benjamin Netanyahu in power, what is Israel's stance on the Arab League's counter-proposal to still go ahead with this redevelopment plan with Gaza, but without displacing any Palestinians? Is this too good to be true of an idea?
Well, I think Trump's first statement that the 1.5 million or 2 million Gazans should be moved elsewhere, even before we enter into the ethical parts of it, is very difficult to justify practically. How do you move 1.5 million people who don't want to move? As I say, they would like to go to Britain or to France or to the United States, but they don't particularly fancy going to Somalia or to Afghanistan or the Sinai Desert or wherever. And I say particularly fancy using highly diplomatic language here. Of course, they would refuse to do that under any circumstances. But I think what has happened with the Trump proposal on that is that it's initiated a dialogue in the Arab world about what needs to be done. And the Egyptian approach, instead of sitting around waiting for Israel or for and complaining that Israel this, Israel that, or Israel the other, or the United States or Europe, instead of sitting around waiting, they actually have to come out with their own initiative. What can be done? And I hear the Egyptian proposal, it might not be acceptable in its entirety right now, but it's an idea on the table. And it's an idea which can develop into further ideas, and it needs further work, and it needs further usage. However, we are seeing the seeds here of something that can perhaps be done, and the ball has been very squarely put by Trump, I must say, in the court of the civilized Arab world. And as Mr. Mustafa just said, there is a great deal of civilization in the Arab world. If it's the Egyptians, if it's the Gulf world, the UAE, Saudi, Bahrain, if it's Jordan, if it's Morocco, there are a number of countries in the Middle East that want the good of the Palestinians, but do not want the good of the extremists and the Hamas. And here what we are looking at is now perhaps some sort of movement in the direction of a solution proposed by the Arab world in order to alleviate the situation, to rebuild Gaza, but to make it in such a way that it'll be practically possible. I don't know whether this particular plan, I don't think this particular plan that's been put on the table is by Egypt and by the Arab world is the plan. But it's the start of a sort of a movement, of a maneuvering to find what would be a good proposal to bring about an end to the suffering of the Palestinian people under their own leadership, on the one hand, and to the suffering of Israelis and Palestinian societies, so that somehow we can find a way to live together in the future. So there is something positive going on here. It's not going to be a quick fix, something that will happen from one day till the next. Yeah. But I think that we're seeing a positive dynamic about what could possibly happen in Gaza, where all and every civilized country and nation in the world is unified on one thing: it will not happen under Hamas, and it must not happen under Hamas, because that's just a recipe for further conflict and further sadness for the people of Palestine and the people of Israel.
Mustafa Ahmed Munaf and Mark Sofa, thank you very much for joining us. We now move to some more news updates. The United States has suspended intelligence sharing with Ukraine, a move that could significantly impact Kiev's military operations against Russian forces. This decision follows the US halting military aid to Ukraine. Watch the latest updates in this report.
The US has suspended intelligence sharing with Kyiv. This move could severely restrict the Ukrainian military's ability to strike Russian forces and plan military operations effectively. CIA Director John Ratcliffe confirmed the pause in support, but indicated that cooperation could resume if peace talks between Ukraine and Russia move forward. Since the start of the war in 2022, the US has provided Ukraine with significant intelligence, including critical information that its military needs. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed willingness to negotiate with Russia, saying his country is ready to come to the table for lasting peace. Meanwhile, a Russian missile strike on a hotel in the Ukrainian city of Kryvyi Rih killed 4 people. The city has been a frequent target since the war started 3 years ago. Despite ongoing attacks, Ukraine continues to push for an end to the war. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
We will now take a look at some news updates from across North America. Hundreds of US diplomats have joined to write a letter to US Secretary of State Marco Rubio protesting the disassembly of US aid. The diplomats expressed their concern about how this might create a vacuum for China and Russia to exploit it. More than 700 diplomats have signed the letter expressing their concerns. 3 skiers were swept away by an avalanche late Tuesday afternoon. The snow deposited by an avalanche was up to 100 feet deep, and skiers were likely buried at depths greater than 30. Poor weather conditions for the past 2 days have kept skiers at the site. Troopers were hopeful the condition will improve today. The Department of Veterans Affairs is planning a reorganization. This would include cutting down 80,000 jobs from agencies providing care and services to thousands of veterans. Veterans have been vocal in their opposition to the cuts the VA, as more than 25% of the VA's workforce is comprised of veterans. A new travel ban by President Donald Trump could bar people from Afghanistan and Pakistan from entering the US. Trump's directive is part of an immigration crackdown that he launched at the start of his second term. The new ban could affect tens of thousands of Afghans who have been cleared for resettlement in the US as refugees. Trump is all set to sign an executive order to facilitate the closure of the education department. This move is part of Trump's campaign to decentralize education. This has angered the Democrats, teachers, and parents who see this as an attack on the public education system. Democratic mayors from 4 US cities, Boston, Chicago, Denver, and New York, were criticized in Congress for their pro-criminal immigration policies. All 4 cities have struggled to cope with a huge influx of immigrants crossing from Mexico. Republicans are trying to support President Donald Trump's approach to deporting immigrants. In a tragic incident earlier today, a South Korean Air Force fighter jet accidentally released bombs over civilian areas during a training exercise, resulting in multiple injuries and significant property damage. Let's take a look at the full report.
The town of Pocheon, located approximately 40 kilometers northeast of Seoul, was abruptly disrupted this morning when a South Korean KF-16 fighter jet accidentally dropped 8 10K-82 bombs during a routine training exercise.
오늘 우리 포천시에 있을 수 없는 일이 벌어졌습니다. 승진 과학 훈련장에서 실시 중인 한미 연합 사격 훈련 중 포탄이 민가에 떨어져 무고한 시민들께서 중경상을 입고 수채의 가옥과 차량이 파손되는 끔찍한 사고가 발생을 했습니다.
The unintended release occurred around 10 a.m. local time, with the bombs landing outside the designated firing range, impacting residential areas. Emergency services reported that 15 individuals sustained injuries, 2 of whom are in serious condition. The incident also resulted in the destruction of a church and 6 other buildings in the village.
지역에 포탄이 떨어진 사건은 공군의 훈련 관리 및 안전 절차가 심각하게 미비했음을 여실히 보여주는 사고로 이에 대한 책임을 엄중히 묻지 않을 수.
The South Korean Air Force has expressed deep regret over the incident, stating, "We deeply regret the unintended release of the bombs, which resulted in civilian casualties and wish those injured a swift recovery." An accident response committee has been established to investigate the cause of the malfunction and to assess the full extent of the damages. Local residents have long voiced concerns over the proximity of military training exercises to civilian areas, citing potential dangers and disturbances. This incident comes just days before the annual Freedom Shield exercises, a series of joint drills between South Korea and the United States aimed at strengthening defense readiness. As investigations proceed, the focus remains on providing medical assistance to the injured and addressing the concerns of the affected community. The South Korean military has pledged comprehensive measures to prevent such incidents in the future. Bureau Report, NewsX World.
And that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.